What's up guys, Brady Figuel here coming at you with a review for the new Scowl album, Are We All Angels, released this past Friday, April 4th. This is only this band's second album, but they've grown quite a following over the years, especially after their first album, How Flowers Go, released back in 2021. Despite starting out as more of a heavier band within the overall punk sound on their first EP that came out, they kind of started to go on a gradually more melodic direction, at least to my ears. That album to me sounded more like straight up punk rock with some alt rock influences, some pop punk at times. The vocal style very much brings to mind like some shoegaze elements. But regardless, this band seems to be really bringing punk to a new generation, which is something that I feel like I don't really see much. But then again, as mostly a metalhead, I might just not come across much straight up newer punk rock music. But I came across these guys, obviously, and here we are reviewing this album. And right out of the gate, something I immediately have to compliment this album on is that it does really feel like a new and somewhat fresh take on punk. Sonically and on the production front, I mean, instrumentally especially, this does really feel like straight up classic punk music. Just in kind of like that staticky guitar tone and that chunky bass tone that's pretty audible. And also those really punchy drums that may be a little bit more quiet in the mix, but still manage to actually punch through it pretty clearly. Ultimately, what freshens up the overall punk sound on this album would be lead singer Kat Moss's vocals. She does have some very clear classic punk influence, especially in a track like Let You Down, where she does take her voice in some more kind of upbeat and straightforward directions. But for the majority of the record, she goes for more of this like atmospheric, almost moan-like delivery. Which again kind of bring to mind like shoegaze, or I wouldn't be surprised at all if Chino Moreno from Deftones was an influence on her singing. Obviously present on the overall more melodic songs on here like Haunted and Tonight I'm Afraid. Or the track Suffer the Fool, How High Are You, which is one of my favorite songs on the album, where the music still is pretty upbeat and pretty fast-paced, but she maintained that more spacious delivery like I was talking about, even throughout a song like that. I just feel like for a newer band, like in the not just punk scene, but overall rock scene currently, this is somewhat of a new sound. Which, as somebody who does album reviews pretty regularly and enjoys doing them, that is always something I love to hear. Another really great instance of this is the lead single Special, which does have this overall like somber atmosphere, but still manages to be somewhat upbeat at the same time. And there's also that short little bridge section about halfway through where the mood actually shifts into some more hardcore-esque influences with some screamed vocals, some more mean chord progressions guitar-wise. I like the way they just kind of snuck that part into this song that overall, aside from that part, fits a pretty uniform mood. The transition in and out of it just feels so like smooth and natural. The track Babe is another song on here that brings some prominent hardcore influence to the mix just in the overall presence of scream vocals and more aggressive music. But what I like most about this song actually is how Kat Moss on vocals just effortlessly floats between her really aggressive sounding and visceral sounding screams and her very like smooth, shimmering, clean vocals. That part actually opens the song, so I don't even have to give a timestamp or anything, which is nice. But it was probably the most impressive vocal performance I heard on this album. My favorite track on the album might be the song Fantasy, which I've now talked about tracks 1, 2, and 3 all in a row as highlights, so shout out to the album for starting off strong. The reason I like this song is pretty straightforward, just it's the catchiest and grooviest song on the entire album. That main groove in particular is just fucking perfection. Once again, the vocals in this song are really atmospheric, and they provide for this really cool contrast between those atmospheric vocals and, again, that just monstrous groove. As I said earlier, I also really enjoy the song Suffer the Fool, How High Are You? The main groove to this song is just really energetic, especially in comparison to some of the other songs I'll talk about later in this second half of the album. But it's also got that chorus with that driving snare drum and those vocals that, while, again, still really calming, are also almost frantic in the way that they sound like they're kind of just toppling over each other. And again, I really enjoy the contrast between those more energetic parts and the more emotional parts, which, even vocals aside, guitar-wise as well, just have some really nice and pleasant melodies. Another song that exhibits this kind of balance decently well is Let You Down, once you get past the random like animal noises in the intro. In all those capacities, it's not as good as Suffer the Fool for me, but it's still overall an enjoyable track. And another really compelling track for me is the closing title track. This might be the most chaotic song on the entire album. The way it opens with that staticky bass line, and from there, the song is just pure dissonance. The melodies and chords and the way those specific notes are placed together just sound so like wonderfully ugly. And not only does that make the sound a bit chaotic sounding, like I just said, but it also makes it sound almost like psychologically tormented in a way. In a sense that rather than one strong emotion, whether it's happy or dark, it sounds like there's just every emotion possible swirling around. And it's because of that that the song ends up sounding kind of dark, if that makes sense. Sort of similarly in the same vein as that Druka album I just talked about, if anybody watching this is into black metal. And the way this song keeps adding those like staggering tempo changes, slowing the song down like one part at a time, is really cool sounding. And one of my absolute favorite moments on the album is actually the last 10 seconds of the album. Just the way that the music drops out and you just get those really clean, front and center, isolated vocals. I love how they ended the album that way. If they had just ended it on full-on music, just kind of stopping, it wouldn't be nearly as memorable. And that part alone just instantly makes you want to play the album again. So that, as you can see, there are some really cool songs on here that I find myself enjoying quite a bit. However, I can't really say that about the entire album and every song on here. While there are no songs that are outright bad, there are some that just either go for some kind of experimentation that doesn't really work for me, or they just end up being forgettable. Like the track Fleshed Out, guitar-wise, goes from more of like a alt-rock and maybe even slightly psychedelic leaning sound. But there isn't really anything about the guitars in this song that register with me or keep me coming back to it. Going for more of a rock sound and coming from punk, I feel like the guitars need to be a little bit more catchy and hooky. I feel like that main chord progression, which gets repeated quite a bit, just isn't very inventive. And I'm also not a fan of the vocal style on this song. This is the one song on the album where the vocals don't do it for me. I don't like how they go for that like robotic, droning type sound. Essentially, like, instead of using Kat's voice in a different and cool way that leans more rock on this song, they just made the vocals sound really robotic and monotone. And I'm not sure why. I don't think it adds anything to the song. Especially considering the majority of the song has these types of vocals. It might have been cooler if it was in, like, specific sections to kind of add a new type of contrast to the song. That's not what we got. And there's also tracks like Cellophane and Haunted, which again aren't like bad songs, but they just energy-wise sound so like flat. They bore me at the end of the day. Instrumentally, the guitars in these songs feel like they're kind of just droning on and don't really ever register or hook you in any way. I also feel like the drums could have been a little bit more inventive, at least this late in the album. They use a lot of the same punky and mid-tempo grooves, which I understand both of these aspects could be just the band staying true to their roots, and it might just be a taste thing for me, but this is my review, so I had to say it. And there's also the more kind of middle ground tracks on here that, again, don't stand out as clear weaknesses or filler tracks, but I also don't really see myself coming back to. Like Let You Down, great instance of that. I talked about that one earlier. Tonight I'm Afraid. I do like how this song seems to be like the most kind of laid back and calm song on here. Although it does pick up steam near the end of the track and you get some screen vocals. But again, nothing on this track is really hooking me or making me come back. That middle section of the album is just, it's devastating because for me, clearly, the first 3 tracks and 2 of the last 3 tracks are the best songs on here by a pretty significant margin. Just because of that alone, I don't see myself ever returning to this album like as a full body of work. But, I mean, as I said before, there's nothing bad on this album. I really do enjoy the production. I really respect and enjoy the overall sound that this band is going for. And there are some great songs on here that I added to my playlist. So for all those reasons, I'm going to score this album a 20 out of 30. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to leave your comments below if you have heard this album. Let me know what you think. Hit subscribe if you'd like to see more rock and metal-related content. I also have my Instagram, Spotify, and Threads links in the description of the video. Also, my own original music dropping this summer under the name Old Mentor. I'll link that in the comments as well. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.